So in this video, we're going to take a look at some stereo miking techniques for the Little Sister cover that we looked at last time. So in this video, we'll be looking at the drum kit, the acoustic guitar, and the percussion. With the drums, we'll be looking at a stereo overhead technique and stereo room mic technique, as well as some multi-miking techniques for individual parts of the drum kit. Then we're going to take a look at the acoustic guitar in this track, specifically looking at a technique called mid-side. And then finally we're going to look at the shaker in this track, and we'll be recording that with a technique called X and Y. There'll be comparisons from the original mono track throughout this, so you'll be able to hear the difference that miking in stereo as opposed to mono has on an overall mix.
For the stereo setup on the Little Sister cover, we've introduced quite a few more mics as well as some industry standard stereo miking techniques. On the kick drum, we've kept our Audix D6, again facing the batter side of the head where the beater hits the skin. We've kept that consistent from the mono setup, no change there. But we've also introduced an outside mic to the kick drum, which is the STC 4033, which is set in cardioid, and that's giving us a bit of a better picture of how the drum kind of sounds in the room. There is going to be a bit of bleed in that because we haven't built a tunnel, but we can certainly listen to that in the walkthrough. For the snare drum, we've still got again our control, the AKG D112 on the snare top, same position as it was last week, but we've introduced a Earthworks DM20 underneath the snare. This is going through the same brand of preamp on the same EQ settings, and hopefully what that'll do for us in the mix is allow us to get a little bit more detail and a little more snare sound out of the snare itself. And we've gone this time for a stereo pair of overheads. So we've kept our original mono overhead, which was straight over the snare drum. We've kept that in as same position as possible. And we've introduced a second Coles 4038 over the floor tom. And we're going to be panning these left and right to get a full stereo image of the kit. Both of those microphones are measured equidistant from the centre of the snare drum. They're both around 3 to 4 foot from the middle of the snare. The idea with that is that where we pan them left and right, if the snare is the same level in both of those microphones, it hits the mics at the same time. If it's the same level in both mics, it should stay centre panned. So you could pan that from drummer's perspective, where your hi-hat's on your left and floor tom on your right, or from audience perspective, which would be hi-hat's on your right, floor tom on your left. On the floor tom, we have introduced a Warm Audio WA251 on the top of the floor tom, and we've also mic'd the bottom of the floor tom with another WA251. Both of these are set in cardioid, and what that'll give us is a nice amount of attack and presence transient from the top microphone, and the bottom microphone should give us a lot of low resonance that we can dial in the mix. Finally, for the drum setup, we have a hi-hat microphone, which is the Earthworks SR25, that we're going to use to exaggerate the panning that we'll get from our stereo pair of overheads. In the room, we have a set of Aston Spirit microphones. Both of these are set in figure 8, and these are arranged in a Blumline array. What that's going to do for us is give us a front and a back figure 8 pickup of the top and bottom microphone, and these are positioned off axis to the drum kit, so neither microphone is facing the drum kit directly, and it's just going to capture an overall ambience of the space for us, whilst trying to reject the kit as much as possible on those off-axis responses. And then lastly, we've had a little bit of an experiment for this space. We've popped an SE Gemini 5 in the top left-hand corner of the room, and this is going through a standard audio level or, and we're just doing some extreme compression on that so that we can have our kind of clean stereo set of room mics and maintain a mono microphone to keep that center image. For the stereo setup on the acoustic guitars for this version of Little Sister, we've gone for the Earthworks SR25, which is a cardioid microphone, above a figure 8 Aston Spirit microphone. So the Spirit is faced where the figure of 8 would be rejecting my guitar and picking up left and right that way, so I'm down to mono through the XLR, and this is just getting a cardioid straight image of what I'm doing here. We've kind of stuck with the foot away from the 12th fret neck body joint rule with the cardioid mic on top, and then just position the figure 8 straight below that. Mid side is the only one that's going to require some extra processing once we get into the DAW. For the shakers on the stereo version of Little Sister, we've gone with an XY setup of Earthworks SR25s. So with your XY, you're looking for that 90-degree angle between the capsules of both of your microphones. And this is going to allow us to get a little bit of stereo spread on these shaker tracks. And I'm also tracking this a little further back in the room just to introduce a bit more ambience to it, so that it's not obviously panning, but it just feels a little more natural in the space.